There is a moment, just before dawn, when the world feels suspended between two breaths. A moment where nothing moves, yet everything is alive. And if you listen closely enough, you may begin to wonder, what is it that is holding all of this together? What is it that breathes life into silence? That paints the sky without a hand? That knows you, even when you feel completely lost? And in that quiet whisper of existence, a question arises from the depths of your soul, not loudly but persistently. What is the nature of God? And perhaps the reason this question unsettles you is not because it is too complex, but because it is too close. You see, most of us have been taught to think of God as something distant, something far away, watching from above, measuring, judging, deciding, a figure in the sky separated from us by some invisible boundary. And so we spend our lives reaching outward, searching, pleading, hoping to be seen, hoping to be heard, as if we're standing outside a locked door. But what if that door never existed? What if the very thing you are searching for is the very thing that is searching through you? There is a strange and beautiful paradox in this, that the seeker and the sought may not be two separate things. Like a wave in the ocean trying to find the ocean, not realizing that its very existence is already proof of what it seeks. And in the same way, you, with your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your longing, are not separate from the divine, but an expression of it. Think of a moment in your life when you felt completely alive, not just happy, but deeply present. Perhaps it was standing under the vast sky, or hearing a piece of music that seemed to speak directly to your soul, or holding someone's hand and feeling, for a brief second, that everything was exactly as it should be. In those moments, there is no distance between you and life, no separation, just pure being. That is where the nature of God begins to reveal itself. Because God is not merely an object to be understood, not a concept to be solved like a puzzle. God is the very fabric of experience itself, the silent awareness behind every thought, the stillness beneath every storm, the presence that remains even when everything else falls away. And yet, we forget. We get caught in the noise of the world, in the endless cycle of doing, achieving, proving. We begin to measure our worth by external standards, and in doing so, we drift further away from that quiet truth within us. We start to believe that God must also be measuring us, judging us, keeping score. But listen closely, because this is where everything changes. If God is the source of all existence, then how could that source be separate from what it has created? And if you are part of that creation, then how could you ever truly be separate from God? It is like the sun and its light, the flame and its warmth, the river and its flow. They are not two things, but one continuous expression. And in the same way, your life, your consciousness, your very being is not apart from the divine, but an unfolding of it. There is a story, simple yet profound, of a man who spent his entire life searching for God. He traveled to distant lands, studied ancient texts, climbed mountains, sat in silence for years, and one day, exhausted and defeated, he collapsed beside a quiet stream. And in that moment of surrender, when he had nothing left to seek, he heard the gentle sound of water flowing, and suddenly it became clear. The sound of the stream, the beating of his heart, the breath moving through his lungs, all of it was part of the same living presence. He had not found God as something separate. He had awakened to the realization that he had never been apart from it. And perhaps that is the true nature of God, not something to be found, but something to be realized. A sacred text once says, "Be still and know that I am God. Not strive, not chase, not prove, but be still. And prove, but be still. Because in stillness, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. In stillness, you begin to notice the quiet intelligence that moves life forward without effort, the way your heart beats without instruction, the way your breath continues even when you forget about it, the way the sun rises each day without fail. There is a wisdom here, a quiet, unshakable order that does not demand your understanding, only your trust. And yet, trusting is not always easy, because life has a way of testing us, of bringing us face to face with uncertainty, pain, and loss. There are moments when everything feels chaotic, when nothing makes sense, when God seems silent, distant, absent. But what if, even in those moments, the presence of God is not gone, but simply hidden beneath the surface? Like the roots of a tree during winter, unseen, yet still alive, still holding the promise of spring. There was a woman who once lost everything, her home, her sense of security, her direction in life. And in her darkest night, she cried out, "Where are you, God?" There was no immediate answer, no sudden miracle, only silence. But slowly, something began to shift. She noticed the kindness of a stranger, the warmth of a small meal, the quiet strength within herself that refused to give up. And over time, she began to understand that God had not abandoned her. God was present in every small moment that carried her forward, in every unseen force that kept her going, even when she felt she had nothing left. And so the nature of God is not always found in grand displays or dramatic revelations, but often in the subtle, the ordinary, the deeply personal. It is in the breath you are taking right now. The deeply personal, it is in the breath you are taking right now. The awareness that is hearing these words, the quiet sense of being that exists beneath all your thoughts, and perhaps the greatest illusion we carry is the belief that we are separate from this. Because once you begin to feel that you are not apart from God, but an expression of it, something within you softens. The fear begins to loosen its grip. The constant striving begins to fade. And in its place, there is a quiet sense of peace. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you begin to trust that there is a deeper intelligence at work, guiding, shaping, unfolding, even when you cannot see the full picture. And so you start to live differently. You begin to listen more, not just to the noise of the world, but to the silence within. You begin to notice the sacred in the ordinary, the divine in the everyday. You begin to understand that your life is not a separate story, but part of a much greater unfolding, a vast and mysterious dance of existence. And in that understanding, there is freedom. Freedom from the need to control everything, to have all the answers, to force life into a particular shape, because you begin to realize that you are not alone in this journey, that the same presence that moves the stars, that shapes the mountains, that breathes life into the universe, is also moving within you, guiding you, even now. So when you feel lost, when you feel uncertain, when you feel like you are standing in the dark, remember this gentle truth: you are not separate from God's presence, you are within it, and it is within you. And even in the silence, even in the waiting, something sacred is unfolding, exactly as it should. So be patient, be still, and trust that what you are seeking is already closer than your own breath. And so, as that quiet understanding begins to settle within you, something subtle starts to change. Not in the world around you, but in the way you see it. The same sky, the same streets, the same faces. Yet there is a softness now, a depth that wasn't there before, as if a veil has been gently lifted, and behind it, something infinitely alive is waiting to be noticed. Because once you begin to sense that God is not distant, not separate, but intimately woven into the fabric of your existence, a new question emerges. Not where is God, but why have I felt so alone? And this question carries a quiet ache. There are nights, perhaps you remember them, when everything felt heavy, when your thoughts echoed louder than the world itself, when the silence felt empty rather than full. You may have sat there, wondering if anyone, anything, was truly listening, wondering if your life had meaning, if your struggles were seen, if your prayers, whispered or unspoken, had anywhere to go. And yet, what if in those very moments, when you felt the most abandoned, you were actually standing at the edge of something sacred? You see, the feeling of separation, of loneliness, is not proof that God is absent. It is often the beginning of awareness, the moment where the soul starts to question the illusion it has been living in. Like a dray, and that begins to unravel, not because it is broken, but because you are waking up. There is a story of a child who once became lost in a crowded marketplace, surrounded by noise, by strangers, by unfamiliar faces. Fear began to rise. The child cried out, searching desperately for their parent, convinced they had been left behind. But what the child could not see was that the parent had never left. But what the child could not see, they were standing just a few steps away, watching carefully, waiting for the right moment to step in. And when they finally did, the child ran into their arms, overwhelmed with relief. Watching careful, and never truly alone the entire time. In many ways, this is how we experience life. We move through the chaos, through the uncertainty, through the noise of our own thoughts, and we feel lost. We assume that because we cannot see God, because we cannot hear a clear answer, that we have been abandoned. But perhaps the nature of God is not to interrupt every moment with certainty, but to remain present in a way that invites trust. Because if every answer were given instantly, if every path were made obvious, there would be no space for faith, no room for growth, no unfolding of awareness. Life would become mechanical, predictable, empty of mystery. And yet, it is the mystery that gives life its depth. It is the not knowing, the waiting, the searching that shapes the soul, that softens the heart, that opens you to something greater than your own understanding. There is a quiet verse that says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." And perhaps this is not a command, but a gentle reminder that the essence of your journey is not about seeing everything clearly, but about trusting even when you cannot. Think about the times in your life when things did not make sense, when a door closed unexpectedly, when a path you believed in disappeared beneath your feet. In those moments, it felt like loss, like failure, like confusion. But then, time passed, and somehow something new emerged. A different opportunity, a deeper understanding, a strength within you that you didn't know existed. And when you look back, you began to see that what once felt like an ending was actually a redirection. Not random, not meaningless, but part of a greater unfolding. And this is where the nature of God reveals another layer, not just as presence, but as intelligence, a quiet guiding force that does not always align with your immediate desires, but moves in alignment with something deeper, something that sees beyond the limitations of your current perspective. It is like standing too close to a painting, where all you can see are scattered brushstrokes, random colors, no clear image. But step back, and suddenly a masterpiece begins to appear. The challenge is, while you are inside the moment, you cannot always step back. And so, you are asked to trust the artists, even when you cannot yet see the full picture. There was a man who spent years trying to control every aspect of his life. Every decision calculated, every risk avoided, every outcome carefully planned. And for a while it seemed to work. He built a life that looked stable, predictable, safe. But inside there was a quiet restlessness, a feeling that something essential was missing. And then, one day, everything he had built began to fall apart. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. Plans failed, expectations collapsed, certainty dissolved, and in the midst of it all, he felt completely lost. But in that loss, something unexpected happened. For the first time, he stopped trying to control everything. He stopped forcing answers, stopped resisting uncertainty. And in that surrender, he began to notice something new, a quiet flow, a sense there. T-Life was still moving, still guiding, even without his constant effort. And over time, he came to understand that what he had called control was actually fear, and what he had feared, surrendering, was actually the doorway to peace. Because the nature of God is not something that can be controlled, managed, or predicted. It is something that unfolds, something that flows, something that invites you to participate, not dominate. And this can feel unsettling, because it requires letting go of the need to always understand, to always be certain, to always be in charge. It asks you to trust that there is something greater at work, even when the path ahead is unclear. But in that letting go, there is a quiet freedom. A freedom that does not come from having all the answers, but from realizing that you do not need them, that you are held within something far more vast, far more intelligent, far more compassionate than your fears would have you believe. And slowly, as this understanding deepens, your relationship with life begins to change. You no longer see challenges as punishments, but as invitation. You no longer see uncertainty as something to fear, but as something to explore. You begin to understand that every moment, even the difficult ones, carries within it the possibility of growth, of awakening, of deeper connection, because God is not only present in the light, but also in the shadows, not only in the moments of joy, but also in the moments of struggle. And when you begin to see this, truly see it, something within you becomes steady, not rigid, not unshaken by life, but rooted, like a tree that bends with the wind, yet remains firmly grounded. And so, when the next moment of uncertainty comes, when the path feels unclear, when the silence feels heavy, remember this: you are not being led astray. You are being led deeper, deeper into trust, deeper into awareness, deeper into the quiet truth that you are never separate from the presence that sustains you. So be patient with the unfolding, even when it doesn't make sense. Be gentle with yourself in the waiting, even when the answers do not come. And above all, trust that even now, in ways you cannot yet see, something sacred is guiding your path forward. And as you begin to trust this unseen guidance, as you slowly loosen your grip on the need to control every outcome, something even more profound begins to unfold within you. It is not loud, not dramatic, but deeply transformative. A quiet shift from seeking God outside to recognizing the presence of God within. Because there comes a moment, subtle yet powerful, when you stop asking, "Is God with me?" and instead begin to feel, "God is moving through me." And this realization changes everything. You start to notice your thoughts differently. Not every passing worry, not every fear, 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 not every fear. And in that space, there is stillness. That stillness is not empty. It is alive, aware, peaceful beyond words. It does not argue. It does not rush. It simply is. And perhaps this is one of the deepest expressions of the divine. Not as something you must chase, but as something you can return to. Again and again. There is an ancient understanding, whispered across generations, that says the kingdom of God is within you, not in some distant place, not reserved for a select few, but here, now within the very core of your being. And yet, how often do we overlook it? We search for meaning in achievements, in validation, in the approval of others. We tell ourselves that once we reach a certain point, once we fix what is broken, once we become enough, then we will feel whole. Then we will feel connected. Then we will feel peace. But life has a way of gently showing us that no external achievement can fill an internal disconnection. There was a woman who spent years chasing success. She built a career, gained recognition, achieved everything she once dreamed of. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the noise of the world faded, she felt an emptiness she could not explain. It wasn't that her life lacked value, it was that she had been looking for something in the wrong place. And one evening, after another long day, she sat in silence, not seeking, not striving, just sitting. And in that stillness, something shifted, not in her circumstances, but in her awareness. She noticed her breath, the rhythm of her heartbeat, a quiet presence that had always been there, unnoticed, yet constant. And for the first time, she felt at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer running from herself. You see, the nature of God is not something that demands you become more, but something that gently reveals that you already are. Not perfect, not without struggle, but deeply connected, deeply held, deeply part of something infinite. And when you begin to live from this understanding, your actions start to change, not out of obligation, but out of alignment. Kindness becomes natural, not forced. Compassion flows not as a duty, but as a reflection of what you recognize within yourself. You begin to see others not as separate beings, but as different expressions of the same divine presence. And this is where love takes on a new meaning, not just as an emotion, not just as a fleeting feeling, but as the very essence of existence itself. Because if God is present in all things, then love is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It is already there, beneath the layers of fear, beneath the habits of judgment, beneath the illusion of separation. And when those layers begin to fall away, even slightly, love begins to shine through, naturally, effortlessly. There is a quiet teaching that says, Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. And perhaps this is not meant as a rule, but as a revelation, that to experience love deeply and truly is to experience the presence of God. Think of the moments when you have felt genuine love, not possessive, not conditional, but pure. A moment of forgiveness when you chose understanding over anger. A moment of connection when you truly saw another person beyond their words, beyond their actions. A moment of giving without expecting anything in return. In those moments, there is a sense of expansion, a quiet joy, a feeling that you are part of something greater than yourself. That is the divine expressing itself through you. And yet, there will be times when this feels distant again. Moments when anger rises, when fear returns, when old patterns pull you back into separation. And in those moments, it is easy to feel like you have lost something, like you have failed, like you are no longer connected. But listen gently, because this is important. You cannot lose what you truly are. The presence of God within you does not come and go. It does not abandon you when you struggle. It does not withdraw when you fall short. It remains constant, patient, quietly waiting beneath the surface. Like the sun behind the clouds, even on the darkest day, the sun is still there. And in the same way, even in your most difficult moments, the divine presence within you remains untouched. There was a man who carried deep regret for years, haunted by mistakes he could not undo. He believed he had gone too far, that he had distanced himself from God beyond repair. And so he lived with a quiet heaviness, convinced that he was unworthy of peace. But one day, in a moment of complete exhaustion, he let go, not in defeat, but in surrender. He stopped fighting his past, stopped trying to fix everything, and simply allowed himself to be present. And in that moment, something unexpected happened. He did not feel judgment. He did not feel rejection. He felt a quiet acceptance, a gentle peace that did not depend on his past or his mistakes. And for the first time, he understood that the nature of God is not to condemn, but to embrace, not to push away, but to draw closer. Because what you are, but to draw closer. Because what you are, at your deepest level, has never been separate from that presence. And so, the journey is not about becoming worthy, but about realizing that you already belong to this life, to this moment, to this vast and mysterious unfolding that you are a part of. And as this realization deepens, fear begins to lose its power. Not completely, not all at once, but gradually. Because fear thrives on the illusion of separation, on the belief that you are alone, that you must protect yourself, that you must control everything to survive. But when you begin to see, truly see, that you are held within something greater, something loving, something infinitely wise, fear no longer feels like the ultimate truth. It becomes just another passing wave, rising and falling within the vast ocean of your being. And in that awareness, there is peace, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, that does not require perfection, that simply exists as a reflection of the divine presence within you. So when you find yourself caught in doubt, when you feel disconnected, when the world feels heavy, remember this quiet truth. You do not need to search for God as something outside of you, because the very awareness that is searching is already a reflection of the divine. Be still, even for a moment, and notice what remains when the noise settles. There, in that quiet presence, you will begin to feel it again. A gentle reminder that you are not alone, you have never been alone, and you will never be. So trust this unfolding, even when it feels uncertain. Be patient with your journey, even when it feels slow, and allow yourself to rest in the quiet, knowing that the presence of God is not something you must find. It is something you are already a part of, and it is guiding you, even now, toward a deeper peace than you have ever known. And so, as this deeper peace begins to take root within you, as the noise of striving softens into the quiet rhythm of trust, you may start to notice something extraordinary. Life itself begins to feel different. Not because the world has changed, but because you have begun to see through a different lens, one that reveals the sacred hidden within the ordinary. It is in the smallest things where this truth quietly shines. The way light falls across a room in the early morning, the gentle sound of rain against a window, the laughter of someone you love, or even the stillness of a moment when nothing seems to be happening at all. These are not random fragments of existence, they are expressions. Subtle yet profound, of the same presence that holds the universe together. And when you truly begin to see this, you realize something that cannot be easily put into words, that God is not only within you, not only guiding you, but revealing itself through everything. There is no place where God is not in the chaos, not in the calm, not in the joy, not even in the pain, because the nature of God is not limited to what we call good or bad. It flows beyond these human distinctions. Like the ocean, it contains both the gentle waves and the powerful storms, yet remains whole, undivided, complete. And this realization can feel both comforting and unsettling, because it invites you to see life in its entirety, not just the parts you prefer, but the parts you resist. It asks you to look at your struggles, your fears, your uncertainties, not as enemies, but as part of the same unfolding mystery. There was a man who once spent years avoiding pain at all costs. He built walls around his heart, convinced that if he could protect himself from suffering, he could find peace. And for a while, it seemed to work. He avoided conflict, distanced himself from vulnerability, kept everything controlled. But in doing so, he also distanced himself from joy, because the same walls that kept pain out also kept life from fully entering. And one day those walls began to crack, not all at once, but slowly, through experiences he could not control. Loss, disappointment, moments that forced him to feel what he had long avoided. At first, it felt unbearable. But as time passed, something unexpected emerged. Within the pain, there was depth. Within the vulnerability, there was connection. Within the uncertainty, there was a quiet openness, a space where something real, something alive, could finally be felt. And in that space, he began to understand that peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of something deeper, something that remains steady, even when life is not. And perhaps this is one of the most profound aspects of the nature of God, that it does not remove you from the human experience, but meets you within it. In your joy, it is there. In your sorrow, it is there. In your confusion, in your clarity, in your beginnings and your endings, It is always there, quietly present, gently unfolding. There is a sacred line that says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Not that the valley disappears, not that the shadow is removed, but that within it there is a presence, a guidance, a quiet assurance that you are not walking alone. And this changes how you move through life. Because when you truly feel that presence, not as an idea, but as a lived reality, something within you becomes unshaken, not untouched by pain, but no longer defined by it, not free from uncertainty, but no longer overwhelmed by it. You begin to walk with a different kind of strength, a quiet strength, one that does not need to prove itself, one that does not come from control, but from trust. Trust that even when things fall apart, something deeper is holding you together. Trust that even when the path is unclear, you are still being guided. Trust that even when you cannot see the meaning, there is meaning unfolding beyond your current understanding. And slowly, you begin to surrender, not in defeat, but in faith. A faith that is not blind, but deeply aware. A faith that does not ignore reality, but embraces it fully with all its beauty and all its complexity. You begin to let life flow rather than forcing it. You begin to listen rather than constantly seeking to be heard. You begin to trust the silence as much as the answers. And in this surrender, something extraordinary happens. You feel lighter. Not because your problems have disappeared, but because you are no longer carrying them alone. There is a sense, subtle yet undeniable, that you are being carried, supported, held within something far greater than your individual self. Like a leaf carried by a river, not resisting the current, but moving with it, trusting that it is being taken exactly where it needs to go, and in that trust there is peace. A peace that does not need constant reassurance, that does not depend on perfect circumstances, that simply exists as a reflection of your alignment with the deeper nature of existence. And yet, even in this understanding, life will continue to unfold with its challenges. There will still be moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments where you forget, and that is okay. Because the journey is not about never losing your way, but about remembering again and again the truth that has always been there. Each moment of awareness, each return to stillness, each act of trust brings you back into alignment with that presence. And over time, this remembering becomes easier, more natural, more deeply rooted, until one day you realize that what you once searched for, what you once questioned, what you once felt distant from, has been with you all along, not as something separate, not as something outside, but as the very essence of your being and the silent presence within all things. So when you look at the world, now you begin to see it differently, not as a collection of random events, but as a living expression of something sacred, something infinite, something that you are a part of. And in that seeing, there is a quiet joy, a gentle peace, a deep sense of belonging. Because you are no longer standing outside of life, trying to understand it, you are within it, moving with it, connected to it, as an expression of the very presence you once sought. So be patient as this understanding continues to unfold within you. Be gentle with yourself in the moments when you forget, and trust that even now, in this very moment, you are exactly where you need to be, held within a presence that has never left you and never will. And now, as everything gently comes together, As these reflections settle into the quiet spaces of your heart, there is something deeply simple and yet profoundly life-changing waiting to be felt, not understood with the mind, but recognized with the soul. Because, all along, through every question, every moment of doubt, every search for meaning, you were never moving toward God, you were moving within God. Like a wave that rises, travels, and falls back into the ocean, never once leaving it, you have always been held within the very presence you were seeking. Every breath, every step, every moment of your life, every step, every moment of your life has unfolded inside something infinitely vast, infinitely aware, infinitely compassionate. And perhaps the greatest shift is this: to stop seeing your life as something separate, something you must carry alone, and to begin seeing it as part of a sacred unfolding, guided by a wisdom far beyond what you can always understand. Because the nature of God is not distant. It is not watching you from afar, waiting for you to be perfect, waiting for you to prove your worth. It is closer than your thoughts, quieter than your fears, deeper than your doubts. It is the stillness you feel when everything else fades. It is the love that rises, even when it is hard. It is the strength that carries you when you feel like you cannot go on. And it has been there in every chapter of your life, in the moments you celebrated, and in the moments you broke, in the times you felt certain, and in the times you felt completely lost. Never leaving, never turning away, never giving up on you. And so you do not need to strive so hard anymore. You do not need to search endlessly, as if something is missing. Because what you have been searching for has been gently walking beside you, quietly breathing within you, patiently waiting for you to notice. And now, perhaps, you are beginning to notice that you are not alone, that you have never been alone, that even in your darkest moments, something sacred has been holding you, guiding you, loving you in ways you could not always see. So let this realization soften you. Let it quiet the noise of fear, the weight of overthinking, the pressure to have everything figured out. Let it remind you that you are allowed to trust. Trust the timing of your life, even when it feels uncertain. Trust the path you are on, even when it twists and turns. Trust that every experience, every delay, every unexpected change is part of something meaningful, something that is shaping you, not breaking you. And most of all, trust that the presence of God is not something you must earn. It is something you already belong to. So as you move forward from this moment, carry this quiet knowing with you in your thoughts, in your choices, in the way you see yourself, and the way you see the world. When you wake in the morning, remember, you are stepping into a day that is already held. When you face uncertainty, remember, you are being guided, even if you cannot see how. When you feel overwhelmed, remember, you are not carrying life alone. Pause, breathe and feel it, that gentle presence, that quiet stillness, that unshakable peace beneath everything. That is where God is. And that is where you are. So now, just for a moment, let everything slow down. Let your breath soften. Let your heart open, even slightly. And if you are willing, allow this simple prayer to rise within you, not as words you must say perfectly, but as a feeling, a surrender, a quiet return. God, whatever you are, wherever you are, thank you for never leaving me. even when I could not see you. Help me to trust. Then, help me to trust. Then, even when I do not understand, help me to feel your presence in the silence, in the struggle, and in the stillness of my own heart. Guide me gently, shape me patiently, and remind me again and again that I am never alone. And in that prayer, in that stillness, rest, because nothing more is needed right now. You are here, you are held, and you are already part of something greater than you could ever imagine.
You see, the great cosmic joke is that everyone is trying to arrive somewhere they've never actually left. Isn't that strange? The whole of our modern life is built on this curious illusion that there's a point in the future just around the corner where life will finally begin. We imagine it when we get the right job, or find the right person, or earn enough, or meditate long enough, or become spiritually awake enough. But as a matter of fact, the thing we're searching for is the thing that's already happening right now. Let me put it this way. You can't become what you already are, any more than a wave can become water. It is water. The search itself is the disguise, the game of pretending to be lost so that we can enjoy the adventure of finding ourselves again. Now then, most people don't see this because they've been trained since birth to think of life as a journey and a straight road from A to B, from ignorance to wisdom, from sin to salvation, from childhood to success. But the funny thing about a journey like that is it always keeps the present moment just slightly out of reach, always something to strive toward, always a horizon to chase. And so you end up running on a treadmill that never moves. You know, I once compared time to the grooves on a record. The needle runs along, playing the melody of existence, but every note is happening now. The past isn't something behind you. It's a memory echoing in this very instant. The future isn't somewhere ahead. It's an idea shimmering in your imagination. There is, in truth, only this continuous, eternal now. But the human mind, the tricky fellow that it is, wants to grasp this moment and make it last. It wants to freeze it like a photograph, to say, there it is, I've got it. And the moment it tries, it slips through its fingers. You see, the present isn't a thing you can hold. It's more like a song you can only hear by letting it move. Try to stop it, and it disappears. Now, here's the real mischief. The more you chase the future, the more it runs away. It's like trying to catch your own shadow. The faster you go, the further it flees. And so you become haunted by this feeling of incompleteness, this vague anxiety that something is missing, that you are missing. But let me ask you something. Who is it exactly that's missing? What is this you that's supposed to arrive? The mind creates an image, a better version of yourself, more peaceful, more enlightened, more in control. And that image becomes your God. You kneel before it in silent worship, forever praying to become what you already are. Isn't it funny? The more we seek awakening, the more we affirm our own sleep. Because seeking implies that the thing we want is somewhere else. Yet awakening is precisely the seeing that there's nowhere else to go. You can't wake up later. Now then, imagine a cat sitting in the sun. It's not thinking, if I just purr hard enough, I'll finally become a proper cat. It doesn't strive to be, it is. And that's why it's so effortlessly itself. Whereas we, with all our cleverness, are forever running in circles around our own being, mistaking movement for progress. You've already arrived, but you don't believe it, because it doesn't feel like arrival. You were expecting fireworks, a certificate from the universe, some cosmic pat on the back saying, congratulations, you made it. But instead, there's just this quiet hum of existence, this breath, this moment. And because we've been conditioned to believe that ordinary life is somehow unspiritual, we overlook it. We chase transcendence, all the while trampling the sacred ground beneath our own feet. The birds outside your window, the sound of your breathing, the simple act of being, this is it. Not preparation for it. It. You see, reality is not a path, it's a dance floor. And the point of dancing is not to arrive somewhere, but to move, to express, to play. But we've forgotten how to play because we've taken the whole thing much too seriously. We think existence is an exam we might fail instead of a performance we're meant to enjoy. Now then, the question is not how to reach enlightenment, but how to notice that you are never separate from it. Now then, most people ask, if I've already arrived, why doesn't it feel that way? Well, you see, that's because feeling is a kind of echo. The mind is always a few seconds behind the music. You notice happiness after it's happened. You recognize clarity once the clouds have already passed. In other words, you're always looking at life in the rearview mirror, wondering why the road seems to move while you stay still. But what if the whole trick of life is that you are the road, that everything you've ever been chasing, peace, purpose, love, awakening, has never been ahead or behind, but simply here, wearing the disguise of the ordinary? The reason only a few ever glimpse this is because the rest are busy trying to understand it. The intellect, clever as it is, keeps chewing on the words like a dog with a bone, thinking that meaning is something you swallow rather than something you notice. You see, awakening isn't an achievement. It's the collapse of the one who thought he had to achieve it. Let me put it this way. A fish doesn't need to understand the ocean to swim, and you don't need to understand the present moment to live in it. But the moment you try to explain it, you step outside it, just slightly, like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Isn't it funny how we do that? We keep asking, what's the purpose of life, as though life were a riddle to be solved, when in fact, it's the solver who's the riddle. Life has no purpose apart from living, just as music has no destination apart from being played. If the meaning of a song were only in its final note, you'd never listen to the melody. You'd rush through it to get to the end. And that's precisely what most of us are doing with our lives. We hurry, we strive, we accumulate. Not because we need more, but because we're terrified of stopping. Stillness feels like death to the ego. Yet, it's in stillness that the self begins to dissolve into something infinitely larger. Like a drop of water returning to the ocean, it doesn't lose itself, it realizes itself. Now, the odd thing about awakening is that it's often mistaken for despair in the beginning, because when the walls of illusion start to crumble, you see how much of your life was built on make-believe. The stories, the roles, the endless performing, gone. And at first, that feels like loss. You think, my God, I'm disappearing. But what's actually vanishing is the mask, not the face behind it. You know, people say they want enlightenment, but what they really mean is they want to feel good all the time. But awakening isn't about feeling good, it's about seeing clearly. And once you see clearly, even your sadness becomes sacred. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, spiritual and unspiritual, success and failure. You see it all as one magnificent play, sometimes tragic, sometimes comic, but always whole. And here's the curious paradox. When you stop running from discomfort, it begins to soften. When you stop trying to fix the moment begins to breathe again. Because resistance is what makes life feel hard. The river doesn't struggle to flow, it only struggles when it meets the dam we've built across it. The dam of judgment, expectation, and fear. So, when I say, you've already arrived, I'm not inviting you to complacency. I'm inviting you to intimacy with this very breath, this sound, this fleeting second that will never happen again, to see that this right now is the miracle. The awakening is not in some future paradise. It's in this cup of tea, this heartbeat, this quiet awareness listening to my words. There's nothing missing. There never was. Now then, when you begin to see this, really see it, something inside relaxes for the first time. You stop trying to hold your breath in eternity. You begin to trust that life is carrying you, even when you don't know where. That's what I mean by arrival. It's not a destination, it's a surrender. You see, the reason so few people awaken is not because it's difficult, but because it's too simple. The mind is always looking for something complicated to do, some mountain to climb, some riddle to solve, and when it's told that the truth is already here, it refuses to believe it. It's as if someone spent years searching for their glasses, only to discover they've been on their nose the whole time. And isn't that funny? You can't see what's seeing. You can't stand apart from awareness to catch it. You are it. Awareness can never be grasped because it's doing the grasping. So the whole pursuit of awakening, all the striving, the techniques, the comparisons, that's the dream trying to wake itself up. It's perfectly fine as a game, you understand, but it's only a game. Because what you truly are doesn't need improvement, just recognition. Now, people often say to me, but if I stop striving, won't I become lazy, passive, indifferent? Not at all. You see, when action springs from understanding rather than ambition, it becomes graceful. It's like the way a tree grows or a river flows, without effort, without anxiety. The doing happens naturally once the doer stops interfering. When you know you've already arrived, you no longer chase experience like a collector chasing butterflies. You stop pinning the moment to the wall. You simply let it flutter, alive and free. And ironically, that's when joy returns, because joy was never lost. It was just smothered under all the trying. You begin to notice small things again. The pattern of light through the window, the taste of morning air, the laughter of a stranger on the street. You're no longer measuring them against what they should be. You're simply seeing, and that's awakening, not fireworks in the sky, but the quiet recognition that even the most ordinary instant is sacred beyond words. Now then, this realization doesn't make you special. It makes you real, because the one who thought he was special, the one chasing awakening like a trophy, dissolves. And what's left is just life, breathing itself, perfectly at ease. Now then, when you finally stop trying to arrive, you begin to notice that everything has already arrived. The clouds are moving without effort. The trees are swaying without purpose, and your heart beats without your permission. You realize that life doesn't need your supervision. It's astonishingly self-sufficient. Isn't it funny? We humans are the only creatures who think the universe can't manage without our advice. We worry about becoming enlightened, as though existence had made a terrible mistake by not consulting us first. But the stars aren't worrying, the rivers aren't worrying, even your breath, that subtle tide of in and out, goes on perfectly without you doing a thing. And this is the final irony. The moment you stop chasing awakening, awakening catches you. It was never hiding, you were simply running too fast to notice. It stands behind every breath, beneath every thought, whispering, welcome home. Now, what happens when you live from that realization? You stop acting out of fear. You stop performing life and start participating in it. You become spontaneous again, like a child building sandcastles, knowing the tide will come, but building anyway because play itself is the reward. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop trying to outsmart impermanence. You begin to trust the rhythm of things, the arising and the falling, the blooming and the fading. Let me put it this way. The wave doesn't cling to the sea foam and say, stay. It rises, dances, collapses. And in that collapse it finds its return. That's what you are. The universe playing at being a person disappearing into its own laughter. When you understand this, and I mean really understand it, a strange peace enters the heart. You no longer need to control everything. You no longer measure your worth in victories or awakenings or moments of clarity. You see that even confusion has its place in the dance. You begin to love the whole performance, the good, the bad, the absurd, because it's all one act. And so the invitation is simple. Stop waiting for the grand finale. Stop postponing your existence for a future version of yourself.
It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the faint hum of a melody you have heard before but cannot quite place. One morning you wake and something feels different. The life you have been living suddenly appears unfamiliar, as though you have been following a script written by someone else. You look around and realize that every decision, every belief, every desire that has shaped your days may not have been born from your own depths, but from the silent influences of others. Parents, teachers, friends, society, they all handed you fragments of identity, pieces of what they believed you should be, and over time, you built yourself out of their expectations. And so begins the quiet tragedy of almost every human being. We are taught how to fit in long before we are taught how to be free. We learn the art of pleasing, of performing, of living according to what is rewarded and avoiding what is punished. The strange part is that this happens so subtly that we rarely notice it. We come to believe that the person we have become is the person we truly are. But deep within, a faint whisper continues to call out, reminding us that something essential has been forgotten. When you are young, you are open, spontaneous, unguarded. You laugh for no reason. You cry without shame. You explore without fear. But slowly, you are told which parts of yourself are acceptable and which must be hidden. You are told to stop dreaming so big, to be practical, to stop being so sensitive, to stop asking why. Each correction, each reprimand is like another brick placed upon the wall between you and your true nature. To survive, you learn to hide. To be loved, you learn to pretend. This pretending becomes second nature. You create a version of yourself that feels safe enough to be accepted by others. You wear it like a mask, a face designed for the world. Carl Jung called it the persona. It is useful, even necessary, for navigating society. It allows you to function, to communicate, to belong. But the danger lies in forgetting that it is only a mask. Because when you identify too deeply with the persona, you begin to lose touch with what is real underneath. You start living to maintain the illusion rather than to discover the truth. Yet beneath every mask lies another world, vast and untamed. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the part of ourselves we keep locked away. It contains everything we were told not to be, everything we feared would make us unlovable. Our anger, our jealousy, our shame, our secret desires, our fragility. We like to imagine that these things vanish when we repress them, but they do not. They remain alive and active in the dark corners of the psyche, shaping our behavior in ways we do not see. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the part of you that demands to be seen, not judged but understood. Consider how often you find yourself irritated by another person's behavior, angered by their arrogance or selfishness. What if I told you that these reactions often reveal not the flaws of others, but the disowned parts of yourself? Jung said that what we dislike most in others is usually a reflection of what we cannot accept in ourselves. In this way, life becomes a mirror, endlessly showing us the parts of our being that long for reintegration. To find yourself is to face this mirror without flinching. It is to look into the depths of your own contradiction and see not a monster, but a human being. We all contain light and shadow, love and fear, generosity and selfishness. These are not opposites to be defeated, but energies to be harmonized. For if you reject half of yourself, how can you ever be whole? The journey of awakening does not begin by becoming perfect. It begins by becoming honest. When you begin to turn inward, the noise of the world grows loud. Distractions multiply. You notice how easily you reach for your phone, how quickly you fill silence with activity, how uncomfortable you feel when left alone with your thoughts. This is not coincidence. It is resistance. For the moment you stop running, the buried voices begin to rise. They speak of the dreams you abandoned, the parts of yourself you silenced, the emotions you refused to feel. And they ask you, quietly but persistently, who are you really? This question cannot be answered with words, for words belong to the mind, and the mind knows only labels. The self that you are seeking is not something that can be described or contained. It is not your name, your story, your profession, or even your personality. These are only costumes worn by something infinitely larger. What you truly are is what remains when the costumes fall away. The awareness that watches the play of life unfold. The tragedy is that most people spend their lives mistaking the mask for the actor. They believe that their thoughts define them, that their history confines them, that their fears predict them. But who is it that sees the thoughts? Who is it that observes the story? If you close your eyes and turn attention inward, you may sense it, the silent witness beneath all experience, untouched by pleasure or pain, success or failure. That witness is the true self, and it has been waiting patiently for you to notice. Finding yourself is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering what you have always been. The self is not discovered through effort, but revealed through surrender. You do not dig for it like treasure. You allow it to emerge by removing what hides it. And what hides it most is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen as you are. But these fears are illusions. They arise only because we have mistaken our temporary identity for the truth of our being. When you realize that you are not your image, not your achievements, not your reputation, then fear begins to dissolve. Still, the journey inward is not easy. It requires immense courage to face what you have denied, to look at your own darkness without condemnation, to forgive yourself for the times you betrayed your own soul, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing who you are. But this is the sacred task of every human being, for only through confronting your inner divisions can you become whole again. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of the conscious and the unconscious, the reconciliation of all that you are. It is not the path of becoming good in the moral sense, but of becoming real. It is to allow the entire spectrum of your humanity to exist without denial. When the shadow is brought into awareness, it no longer controls you from the dark. When the persona is seen for what it is, it no longer imprisons you in performance. In this freedom, something miraculous begins to happen. You begin to feel alive again. Not the shallow excitement of external pleasure, but the quiet joy of authenticity. You stop living to impress and start living to express. You stop chasing approval and start following your inner rhythm. You no longer measure your worth by comparison because you realize that you were never in competition with anyone. Life ceases to be a test and becomes a dance. And perhaps this is what it truly means to find yourself, to discover that the self was never lost, only obscured by layers of conditioning. The real you was there all along, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the endless search to be enough. To find yourself is not to travel to distant lands or to collect spiritual experiences. It is simply to stop running away from what you already are. When you finally begin to listen to that quiet presence within you, life changes in subtle but profound ways. You start noticing synchronicities, little coincidences that seem to whisper that you are on the right path. You feel a gentle harmony between your inner and outer worlds. The same world that once felt hostile or indifferent begins to mirror your own awakening. For as you become more real, reality itself becomes more alive. It is here, in this stillness, that life truly begins, not when you have perfected yourself, not when you have found all the answers, but when you have finally stopped pretending. The beginning of awakening is not a grand revelation, but a quiet return, a remembering of something ancient and familiar. You realize that you were never separate, never incomplete, never broken. You were only asleep in the dream of becoming someone else. To wake from that dream is to be reborn, to see yourself not as a role being played, but as the consciousness that animates all roles. And in that realization, the endless striving falls away. What remains is peace, not the peace of escape, but the peace of truth. And perhaps that is where we can say, gently and without hurry, that life does not begin when you achieve something, or when you fix yourself, or when the world finally understands you. Life begins when you find yourself, when you stop searching for meaning in things and people, and realize that meaning has always been the nature of your being. There comes a time when the search for yourself begins to feel less like a journey outward and more like a quiet unfolding inward. You start to notice that every experience, pleasant or painful, was never random. Each one was shaping you, revealing another layer of who you are, beneath the noise of who you were told to be. The heartbreaks that once broke you now appear as moments of awakening. The failures that shamed you now seem like sacred detours. The endless striving to be someone else begins to feel heavy, unnecessary, almost absurd. Because what you have been searching for has always been here, hidden beneath the effort to find it. To find yourself is not to arrive at a fixed destination. It is to return again and again to the living awareness that is already present within you. You are not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The deeper you go, the less you find answers, and the more you find presence. Because the real self cannot be defined by words, only experienced in the stillness between them. When you are truly yourself, there is no image to maintain, no role to perform, no distance between what you feel and what you express. There is only being. Carl Jung described this as individuation, but it is something far more ancient than any theory. It is the same process spoken of by sages across time, the awakening of the soul to its own completeness. When you stop identifying with the mask, when you cease resisting the shadow, when you allow both the light and darkness to coexist within you without judgment, something extraordinary happens. You begin to sense a harmony, a rhythm, as though the entire universe is breathing with you. You realize that your life was never a mistake, that every path, even the crooked ones, was leading you back home. The mind resists this truth because it wants control. It prefers clear answers, solid definitions, boundaries between what is good and bad, right and wrong, self and other. But reality does not operate in such simple lines. Life is fluid, dynamic, paradoxical. You cannot find yourself by clinging to one side of the equation. You must embrace the whole. The mind wants to label the shadow as evil, but the shadow often carries your greatest wisdom. It holds the raw energy of passion, creativity, and courage that you once buried. When you learn to meet it with love instead of fear, that energy transforms. It no longer sabotages your life, it enriches it. Imagine standing before a vast mirror that reflects not just your surface, but every hidden aspect of your being. At first, you resist what you see, the imperfections, the contradictions, the desires you wish you didn't have. But as you continue to look, the resistance softens. You begin to see beauty even in the brokenness. You begin to see innocence in the mistakes, lessons in the pain. And somewhere in that acceptance, something shifts. You no longer feel the need to become someone else. You start to feel a quiet reverence for the person you already are. This is the birth of wholeness. It is not perfection, but inclusion. To be whole is to allow everything within you to belong. Every fear, every dream, every wound, every joy. Nothing is rejected. Nothing is exiled. You begin to realize that what you once called your flaws were simply unloved parts of yourself asking to come home. When you stop fighting them, they reveal their hidden gifts. Anger becomes strength. Sadness becomes compassion. Fear becomes awareness. In this transformation, life begins to move through you effortlessly, without resistance. Many people believe awakening means escaping the world, withdrawing into isolation, rising above the noise of daily life. But the truth is the opposite. To awaken is to enter life fully, to see the sacred in the ordinary, to meet each moment as it is. When you are yourself, the world ceases to be an obstacle. It becomes a mirror of your inner state. You begin to notice that the people who challenge you the most are also your greatest teachers. They reveal where you are still clinging, where you are still afraid to love. In this sense, every encounter becomes part of your awakening. It is not the search for peace that brings peace, but the end of resistance to what is. You find freedom not by controlling life, but by allowing it to unfold. When you stop trying to become something other than what you are, the illusion of separation dissolves. You begin to see that the self and life are not two different things. They are the same flow, the same current moving through form and formlessness alike. The trees, the clouds, the laughter of strangers, the stillness between your thoughts, all of it is you, appearing in countless shapes. The ego fears this realization because it thrives on separation. It says, I am this, and in saying so, it limits what you can be. But when you begin to see through the ego, not as an enemy but as a temporary tool, you discover something vast. You realize that awareness itself, the consciousness that observes, feels, and experiences, has no boundaries. It has no age, no gender, no identity. It is infinite, timeless, untouched. The more you rest in that awareness, the lighter everything becomes. You begin to live, not from fear, but from flow. You begin to act, not from need, but from fullness. The mind wants to fix itself, to improve itself endlessly. It chases healing, transformation, enlightenment, as if they were things to be achieved. But what if there is nothing to fix? What if the real healing happens not by doing, but by being? When you stop trying to become whole and simply rest in the wholeness that already exists within you, something miraculous occurs. The tension dissolves. The struggle ends. Life begins to move through you naturally, like a river finding its way to the sea. Every day offers you an opportunity to remember this truth. Each time you pause, breathe, and simply allow yourself to exist without judgment, you are touching your true nature. It does not demand grand revelations or spiritual rituals. It reveals itself in the quiet moments, the stillness of early morning, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the deep breath that softens your chest. The truth is not hidden in some distant philosophy. It is here, in the simplicity of being alive. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. To find yourself, then, is to wake up from the trance of unconscious living. It is to see that the patterns that once ruled you were never stronger than your awareness of them. The moment you see them clearly, their power dissolves. Awareness is the light that frees you from the prison of repetition. When you begin to live from awareness, your sense of identity expands. You no longer see yourself as a small being struggling in a vast universe. You see yourself as the universe experiencing itself through a particular form. The boundaries between inner and outer, self and other, begin to blur. You realize that every encounter, every emotion, every experience is part of the same dance. The same consciousness that moves the stars moves you. And so, the great paradox of finding yourself is that it leads to the realization that there was never a separate self to begin with. What you truly are is not confined to a body or a story. You are the space in which all stories arise and dissolve. You are the awareness in which all thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear. The self you have been seeking is not something to acquire. It is the seeing itself. When you understand this, you stop searching. You begin to live. Life begins the moment you stop trying to fix the past or control the future. It begins when you allow this moment, exactly as it is, to be enough. When you rest in that simple presence, the weight of becoming falls away. You realize that you were never incomplete, never broken, never lost. You were simply asleep to your own depth. And now you are awake. Life does not begin when you become someone new. It begins when you remember who you are, the timeless awareness behind all change. To find yourself is to see through the illusion of separation and to realize that you have always been home. And from that place of quiet knowing, you begin to live not as a seeker, but as the song itself.
When a person begins to notice what others overlook, there is at first a kind of thrill. It feels like lifting a veil, like peering behind the stage into the machinery of the play. Suddenly, what seems solid and unquestionable is revealed to be shifting, relative, even dreamlike. Yet along with this exhilaration comes a quieter, heavier sensation, the realization that most people do not see and perhaps do not wish to. What you thought would be a shared discovery is instead a private burden. You may try to explain, to put into words, the insight that has dawned on you, but the language falls flat, and those you speak to blink as though you are speaking in riddles. It is as if you are pointing at the moon and they only see your finger. The danger of seeing what others do not is not so much that you are wrong, but that you are alone. Human beings are social creatures, and belonging is as essential as food or air. When the crowd looks one way and you are gazing in another, there is a current of unease. To be the only one who notices the emperor's new clothes is not merely a story about honesty, but about the peril of being out of step with the group. We draw safety from consensus, from the feeling that if everyone agrees, then it must be so. But the moment you glimpse something that contradicts the agreement, you find yourself at odds with the very fabric that holds people together. There is also the danger of arrogance. To see what others do not can feed the subtle belief that you are superior, that your vision grants you a special status. But this quickly becomes its own trap. For the moment you define yourself as the enlightened one, you have merely built a new wall between you and the rest. What began as a discovery dissolves into pride, and pride always isolates. The vision itself may have been clear, but the self that grasps it turns cloudy. In trying to hold on, you lose the very freedom you had glimpsed. Think of a child who suddenly understands a joke before anyone else in the room. They laugh aloud, expecting others to join, but the silence that greets them feels cold. The joy of recognition becomes embarrassment. In that instant, they learn that timing matters, that understanding out of sync with others can sting. Adults feel the same sting, though it wears the clothing of philosophy, religion, or insight. To wake up while others are still dreaming is not always a triumph. It can be profoundly lonely. And yet, what is it that we see when we see differently? Often, it is the fleeting nature of things, the fragility of what others call permanent. We notice that money, power, reputation, all the idols of society are as insubstantial as smoke. We notice that the roles people cling to with such intensity are costumes that will be dropped sooner or later. We notice that beneath the noise of ambition and fear, there is a silence, an openness that does not strive at all. To see this is to see through the game. And once you see through it, you cannot play it with the same seriousness again. But the others continue, earnest and intent, and your laughter sounds to them like madness. This is why so many teachers, poets, and mystics have spoken of exile. Not always a literal banishment, but a subtle one, the sense of not fitting, of being slightly out of tune with the orchestra around you. The music plays, but you hear a dissonance others ignore. And when you point it out, the players insist that everything is fine. You begin to wonder if you are the one out of tune, if the clarity that once felt liberating is instead a form of delusion. The mind wavers between certainty and doubt, and both carry their own weight. But consider that every vision, every new perception in history has always begun with someone who saw differently. The danger of seeing what others do not is real.
but it is also the seed of transformation. Still, in the beginning, it feels like standing at the edge of a vast forest while the village insists the world ends at the meadow. You want to describe the trees, the shadows, the depth of the woods, but to them it sounds like fantasy. And so you stand with one foot in the known and one foot in the unknown, belonging fully to neither. This is the tension. To carry in your heart a glimpse of something wider, something truer, while moving among people who are content with their smaller maps. The danger is not only that they will misunderstand you, but that you will begin to misunderstand yourself, to doubt the vision, or to inflate it, or to guard it so fiercely that it becomes brittle. You may try to smother it, to return to ordinary sleep. But the dream of the world never fits again once you have seen beyond it. You may try to proclaim it loudly, but the louder you shout, the less others hear. And so you walk with it quietly, unsure whether it is a blessing or a curse. There is also fear, the kind of fear that whispers, if I let go of what the crowd believes, where will I belong? For belief is not merely a private act. It is the glue of societies, families, friendships. To question it is to risk unraveling bonds that feel necessary for survival. And so, many who see hesitate to admit it, even to themselves. They carry the vision like a secret flame, shielding it from the wind of public opinion, never certain if they're protecting it or themselves. The danger is isolation, the danger is misunderstanding, the danger is pride, but beneath all of these, the deepest danger is that you will forget how to laugh. To take your vision so gravely that you become rigid, cut off not only from others, but from the very life that showed you this glimpse in the first place. This is why many who awaken fall into despair before they find peace. It is the dark night of seeing what others do not. It is not enough to notice the illusion. The greater challenge is to live with that noticing, to carry it gracefully among those who are still entranced. To be in the world but not of it, as some traditions put it, is not a slogan but a daily balancing act. And until that balance is found, the gift of sight can feel like a curse. For to walk in two worlds at once is never comfortable. And yet, what seems at first to be a curse reveals itself, with time, to be the very doorway into freedom. The loneliness of seeing differently is only sharp when you imagine that you must convince others that your vision has to be validated by the crowd to be real. The moment you let go of that demand, the burden softens. For truth is not dependent upon recognition, and awareness does not become less itself because it is unnoticed. The sky does not stop being the sky when clouds cover it, and the ocean does not cease to be the ocean when no ship sails its surface. In the same way, what you have seen remains what it is, whether or not another agrees. The resolution, then, is not to return to sleep, nor to shout at the dreamers, but to walk lightly, to live what you have seen without needing applause. When you understand that the world is play, that life is a dance, you can smile at the earnestness of those still caught in the game without condemning them. You see that their seriousness, their striving and fear are also part of the whole, just as your laughter and insight are. The one who sees is not apart from those who do not see, but an expression of the same reality, taking on a different mask. This changes the flavor of your vision. What was once heavy becomes light. The awareness that isolated you begins to connect you more deeply. For now you recognize that those who do not see are not wrong. They are simply playing another part in the cosmic performance. Without them, there would be no contrast, no stage upon which your own role makes sense. Just as music requires silence, just as light requires shadow, the clarity of sight requires the backdrop of blindness. The difference does not divide, but completes. Think of the flower blooming in a field. It does not demand
that the grasses beside it also bloom in the same way. It simply unfolds, radiates, expresses its nature. And in doing so, it contributes to the whole field, not by making others like itself, but by being precisely what it island. So too with the one who sees. The task is not to reform the world into your vision, but to live your vision as naturally as the flower blooms. In that authenticity, you become nourishment for others, whether they realize it or not. And sometimes, without effort, others notice. A word you speak casually, a silence you embody, a lightness in your presence, these become sparks that awaken curiosity. But even if they do not, nothing is lost. The play continues, the dance unfolds, and your part is no less vital because it is unrecognized. The true gift of seeing differently is not superiority, but freedom. You are no longer bound by the unquestioned rules of the game. You may play them if you wish, for the joy of it, but you are not deceived into thinking the outcome is final. You may step back when the game grows tedious, laugh when others are grim, and rest when others are restless. This freedom is subtle, but it changes everything. For when you are no longer driven by the compulsion to prove, you discover a gentleness that can embrace all. Even the danger that once haunted you of being alone, of being misunderstood, becomes part of the comedy. You see that every prophet, every poet, every thinker who glimpsed beyond the ordinary faced the same fate. And yet their words carried through time, not because they fought the blindness of their contemporaries, but because they simply sang their song. And so the invitation is not to fight, but to sing. To let your vision express itself in whatever way it wishes, whether in speech, in silence, in action, or in stillness. In this way, the danger dissolves into play. The one who sees and the one who does not are both the universe in disguise. There is no real separation, no real opposition. What looked like alienation is in fact another face of intimacy. For to be the only one awake in a room of sleepers is still to share the same room, the same night, the same dream. The laughter you carry, though quiet, is still part of the whole sound. And so, you may rest, you may see without clinging, you may walk without boasting, you may love without demanding agreement. The vision you carry is not a weapon, not a burden, not even a possession. It is simply the light by which you move, as natural as breathing, as effortless as being. And in time, you may even forget that you are different, for the difference no longer defines you. You are not the seer against the blind, but the whole itself, playing at many levels of awareness, all equally necessary, all equally divine. And perhaps the most subtle shift of all is this. What once seemed like your private vision begins to reveal itself as nothing personal at all. The sight that you carry is not your possession, not an achievement of the mind, but the universe opening its own eyes through you. In that moment, even the idea of seeing differently softens, for you recognize that all seeing belongs to the same awareness. The distinction between those who see and those who do not becomes less sharp, more playful, like the changing of roles in a play where each actor takes their turn under the spotlight. Consider the ocean again, with its endless waves. Some waves rise high, glistening in the sun, while others barely ripple upon the surface. To the eye, they seem distinct, greater or lesser, bold or quiet. But to the ocean, they are one movement, inseparable. The wave that sees its own crest does not look down upon the trough. It knows both of the same water. So it is with the one who glimpses beyond the usual illusion. Not superior, not apart, but simply aware that all are movements of the same depth. This awareness gives birth to compassion. For when you no longer feel compelled to drag others into your vision, you can love them as they are. The seriousness with which they chase their ambitions, the fears they nurse, the dramas they play out, all of it becomes endearing, as though you were watching children at play.
Not condescension, but tenderness, because you recognize yourself in them. You too once played those games in full sincerity, and perhaps you still do, for even the awakened must sometimes forget in order to live. Forgetting is part of remembering, blindness is part of sight, and so you walk more gently, you listen more patiently, you smile more easily. The vision you carry ceases to be a sharp edge dividing you from others, and becomes instead a soft light by which you move among them. You are not required to convince or convert, only to live in such a way that your very being whispers of a freedom beyond striving. That whisper, whether heard or not, belongs to the music of the whole. Notice also how the danger dissolves when you see that what you feared isolation was never truly there. The feeling of being apart arose only when you believed that awareness belonged to you, that you were a solitary flame among darkness. But the flame was never yours. It is the fire of existence itself, and it burns in every heart, whether seen or unseen. You cannot be apart from it, any more than a drop of water can fall outside the sea. The very sense of separation was part of the illusion you were meant to see through. And what then remains? A deep ease, a kind of trust. You do not need to calculate how others will respond, or whether your insight will be accepted. You simply live, and in that living the truth finds its own expression. Sometimes it will flower visibly, sometimes it will lie hidden beneath the soil, but the life of it continues, regardless. You no longer demand outcomes, because you no longer confuse outcomes with reality. Reality is here already, shimmering in each moment, and you are not apart from it. This is why many who see differently eventually become playful again. They laugh more, they sing, they enjoy the simple things. For when the burden of proving and defending falls away, what remains is the joy of being, and that joy is contagious in ways words never are. People may not understand your philosophy, but they feel your presence. They may not follow your reasoning, but they sense your ease, and in time, that ease does more than any argument could. So perhaps the true resolution is not to stand above or apart, but to rejoin the play consciously, to move among others not as a stranger, but as a companion who knows the dream is a dream and still delights in its colors. To take part in the laughter and the tears, not because you are deceived, but because you recognize them as the texture of the whole. In this way, seeing what others do not ceases to be a danger at all. It becomes a gift, not only to you, but to everyone around you, even if they never realize it. And as the words slow and the reflection settles, perhaps you can sense the spaciousness in which all of this unfolds. The danger, the vision, the loneliness, the joy, all of it rising and falling, like breath, like waves, like the endless turning of the earth. To see is simply to notice this movement. To live is to be this movement, and to rest is to allow it all, without resistance, without demand, without fear. If you're hearing these words, it isn't by mistake. This moment found you exactly when it needed to, not a second too soon, not a moment too late. Life has a way of arranging such meetings when the noise begins to settle just enough for you to notice its whisper. Perhaps you were looking for something tonight, or perhaps you stumbled here without knowing why. But nothing truly stumbles. Everything arrives with a certain rhythm, like the wave that reaches the shore precisely when the tide decides it's time. We like to believe we choose what we see, what we listen to, what we pay attention to. Yet, sometimes it feels more truthful to say that life chooses for us that certain ideas, certain voices, certain moments seek us out when we're ready to hear them. So maybe you didn't find this. Maybe it found you. And if it did, it's because something inside you is ready to remember. Ready to remember that change is not the enemy, that growth does not have to come with struggle, and that even the smallest shifts can carry you toward a life you can finally breathe in. A lot can change for the good in 6 months, not through obsession or pressure, but through awareness, gentleness, and a willingness to cooperate with what already wants to unfold. 6 months, that's all it takes for the seasons to turn, for a tree to shed and grow anew, for the moon to circle the earth half a dozen times. 6 months is long enough for an old pattern to dissolve and a new rhythm to take root. Yet to the hurried mind, it sounds like an eternity. To the wise heart, it's only a breath. So let us begin not with a plan, but with a pause. Take one slow breath and feel how even this simple act carries you from the person you were a moment ago into someone slightly changed. Every inhale is arrival, every exhale, release. This is the entire secret of transformation written in the language of the body. Take in what nourishes, let go of what no longer serves, and trust the rhythm in between. The first teaching, then, is simple. Do not rush your becoming. You cannot bully the flower into blooming, nor scold the sun into rising faster. Life ripens at its own pace. What matters is not speed, but sincerity. When you give yourself completely to the moment you're in, time becomes an ally rather than a threat. The minutes are no longer something to beat, they are something to inhabit. You see, most people try to change their lives as though they were rearranging furniture, push this here, drag that there, throw out what you don't like. But the deeper kind of change begins in stillness. It starts when you stop treating yourself as a project to be fixed and start seeing yourself as a process to be understood. 6 months of honest observation, noticing your reactions, your habits, your hidden fears, will do more than 6 years of self-improvement performed out of guilt. The second teaching is awareness. Not the strained awareness of someone trying to meditate perfectly, but the soft kind, the awareness that simply notices. Notice when you tighten, notice when you breathe freely, notice what brings lightness to your chest and what contracts it. Awareness doesn't demand that you act immediately. It only asks that you see clearly. And clarity, all by itself, begins to move mountains. You might say, but noticing isn't enough. I need to do something. Yet the truth is, most of our doing springs from confusion. We act before we understand, and then we wonder why the results look the same. The power of awareness is that it lets right action emerge naturally, the way a path appears once the fog lifts. 6 months of honest noticing will reveal more direction than a lifetime of anxious decision-making. The third teaching is gentleness. Real growth is tender, not violent. The seed breaks open not because it is forced, but because the conditions invite it. So be gentle with your timing. You are unfolding exactly as you must. Gentleness is not laziness. It is intelligence, the intelligence of the universe that knows how to turn an acorn into an oak without rushing. When you replace self-criticism with curiosity, life begins to cooperate with you instead of resisting you. The next teaching is presence in the ordinary. Many people chase enlightenment as if it were hidden in some distant temple, when in truth it hides in the small things you overlook. The way sunlight falls on your hands, the sound of water running from the tap, the silence between two breaths. If you give yourself to these, even for a moment, you are already practicing awakening. 6 months of giving your full attention to the simple will make the complex take care of itself. Now, the mind will argue that such small things can't possibly change a life. It wants grand gestures, dramatic transformations, fireworks of self-reinvention. But think of the ocean. It shapes continents grain by grain. Think of music. It's nothing but waves of air, yet it can make you weep. The subtle is not weak, it is foundational. If you honor the subtle each day, you begin to live from the source instead of the surface. The fifth teaching is trust. Trust is the quiet confidence that the universe knows what it's doing, even when you do not. It is understanding that you are being shaped by forces wiser than your plans. Trust is not blind faith, it's intimate cooperation with reality. It's what happens when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? and begin asking, what is this showing me? In 6 months of living with that single shift in question, you would become unrecognizable, not because life got easier, but because you stopped fighting what was already trying to help you grow. And of course, gratitude, the awareness of enough. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending that everything is perfect. It means noticing that perfection isn't required for beauty. The moment you begin to thank the small things, a clear sky, a kind word, the warmth of your own body, you step into abundance. For 6 months, practice this. Whenever you catch yourself complaining, pause, breathe, and name one thing that still supports you. You will find the complaint fades, and in its place, something steady arises, a kind of quiet contentment that doesn't depend on circumstance. Now, someone might say, but I've tried all this before. I know these ideas. To which I would ask, do you know them, or have you simply heard them? To know a truth is to live it until it becomes the way you breathe. 6 months of living, even one of these truths, sincerely will teach you more than 100 inspirational quotes ever could. And so the invitation is simple. Do less, notice more. Stop demanding that life give you instant proof of progress. The proof is already there, in every breath, every sunrise, every gentle reminder that you are still here, still capable of renewal. You are not late, you are not behind. You are right on time, because time itself is your teacher, not your jailer. Let this next half year be your experiment in trust. Let it be the season in which you stop forcing and start listening. Watch what happens when you replace control with curiosity, tension with patience, judgment with awareness. The change will not announce itself with fanfare. One morning, you'll simply wake up and realize the heaviness you used to carry is gone. You didn't fix it. It simply melted when you stopped feeding it. And when that happens, you will smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand it never needed to be. You will see that the universe was never testing you, only teaching you to listen. And in that listening, the next 6 months and the rest of your life will take care of themselves. There comes a moment when awareness no longer feels like practice, but presence, when you stop trying to be mindful and simply are. It happens quietly, often without you noticing. You realize one day that the thoughts which once ruled you have softened, that the noise has lost its authority. You still think, you still plan, you still worry from time to time, but the thoughts no longer pull you by the collar. They pass through like weather over a mountain. The mountain does not resist the clouds. It allows them to drift by, knowing they cannot stay. This is what maturity of spirit feels like, not perfection, not constant peace, but a deep familiarity with change. You no longer fear every shift in mood, every season of uncertainty. You begin to see that everything, even confusion, has its place in the dance. 6 months of living this way, of greeting each day as a visitor rather than an obstacle, and you will notice the difference not in what happens to you, but in how you meet it. The great paradox of awakening is that it doesn't make you immune to life. It makes you more intimate with it. The rain still falls, the heart still aches, the losses still come, but suffering changes its texture. Pain is no longer an enemy to flee. It becomes a teacher to listen to. And the listening itself is the release. When you stop running from what hurts, you find that what hurts had something sacred to tell you all along. You begin to see that control was never the source of safety. Control is the mind's imitation of trust, an anxious attempt to replace faith with structure. But life cannot be caged. The more tightly you grip, the more it slips. Yet when you open your hands, everything falls gently into place. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stop disturbing the natural flow. You see, there is a wisdom at work beneath your plans, the same wisdom that turns caterpillars into butterflies, tides into moons, seeds into forests, That wisdom does not need your constant supervision. It only asks that you cooperate by not standing in the way. When you align with that intelligence through stillness, through honesty, through awareness, life begins to move through you effortlessly. You become the dancer who no longer counts the steps, but simply moves with the rhythm. This is what the ancient Taoists called Wu Wei, effortless action, doing without forcing. It does not mean passivity. It means the harmony between what you want and what the moment allows. To act in this way is to feel that life is not something happening to you, but something happening as you. The boundary between the doer and the deed dissolves. You are painting, but also being painted. You are breathing, but also being breathed. If, for 6 months, you practiced only this, the art of letting life breathe through you, you would begin to taste freedom, not as an idea, but as a lived reality. You would wake in the morning not with the weight of things to control, but with curiosity for how the day might unfold. The mind would still whisper its worries, but you would smile at them like an old friend who no longer needs to be believed. And in this space, something miraculous happens. Joy returns. Not the fleeting pleasure that depends on outcomes, but the quiet joy of existing. The kind of joy a child feels watching raindrops race down a window, or the kind that rises for no reason at all while walking alone. This joy is the natural fragrance of presence. It doesn't need an explanation. It is what remains when the noise of striving fades. You may ask, but what about ambition? What about goals? The awakened person doesn't lose direction. They simply stop mistaking the destination for the journey. There's nothing wrong with wanting success, or love, or peace, but you will suffer if you think they live somewhere in the future. All the joy you seek is hidden in how you walk toward them, not in their arrival. 6 months of walking mindfully toward what you love will change your relationship with desire itself. You will no longer chase, you will invite. This is the art of surrender, not giving up, but giving in. To surrender is to recognize that life knows more about life than you do. It is the humility to admit that the same intelligence that orchestrates galaxies might be trusted to handle your next chapter. When you surrender to that intelligence, you stop praying for things to go your way and start asking to see the way things are. That shift alone can dissolve a lifetime of tension, and so you begin to act from stillness instead of panic. You begin to speak from clarity instead of defense. You begin to love without needing to possess. What once felt like effort becomes grace. What once felt like a burden becomes a blessing in disguise. In that simplicity, 6 months can become a lifetime's worth of evolution. Now, there's another illusion worth letting go of, the illusion of progress as linear. You will not rise every day. Some days you'll fall. Some weeks you'll feel lost. But understand, a spiral moves both upward and inward. Growth revisits its lessons, but each time with more awareness. When you see old patterns return, don't call it failure, call it review. The universe is showing you what's left to integrate. 6 months of honoring even your setbacks as sacred will reshape how you see yourself. Instead of punishing your mistakes, you will learn from them like a patient gardener who studies why a flower didn't bloom, not with anger, but with curiosity. You will begin to see that every event, pleasant or painful, was another doorway to understanding. And that understanding, not achievement, is what makes a life fulfilled. Eventually, you will look back on these months and realize that what changed most was not your circumstances, but your relationship with them. The storm didn't stop. You learned how to dance in the rain. The noise of the world didn't quiet. You discovered the silence beneath it. The future didn't become certain. You made peace with uncertainty itself. That peace is freedom, not escape from life, but intimacy with it. And then, at last, the mind relaxes. It no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. You see that life was never asking you to win, but to awaken, to participate, to witness the miracle of being conscious, even for a brief moment, in this endless unfolding of the cosmos. What could possibly be missing from that? So, if these words have found you, let them remind you of something you already know deep down. You are not late, you are not broken, you are not behind, you are precisely where the river needs you to be. The current has carried you here, not to test you, but to teach you how to flow. The coming 6 months will pass, whether you worry or not, whether you struggle or trust. But if you choose trust, if you choose awareness, gentleness, gratitude, then those same 6 months can become the softest revolution of your life. And when the time comes to look back, you will smile, not because everything went according to plan, but because you finally learned to dance with the plan of everything. And in that smile, life will smile back.
There's something happening to you right now that you can't quite name. And I need to tell you something about it that might be difficult to hear. This feeling you're carrying, this strange place you're in, it's not a waiting room. It's not preparation. It's not the space before your life begins. It's the most dangerous phase of your entire journey. Dangerous because most people don't survive it. Not physically, but they abandon themselves here. They quit here. They convince themselves the vision was never real. And they do it right before everything was about to change. You clicked on this video not for entertainment, not to pass the time. You clicked because something inside you is looking for confirmation. Confirmation that this feeling, this strange mixture of certainty and confusion, isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. Let me tell you what I think is actually happening. You can see it. The life you're supposed to be living, the person you're supposed to become. It's not a vague dream anymore. It's specific. It's detailed. You can almost touch it. And that's precisely what makes your current reality so unbearable. Because you're standing here, and that future is standing over there, and the distance between the two feels like it might kill you. Some days you wake up and there's this electricity running through you. Everything feels possible. You make decisions from that future place, bold decisions, and for a few hours you inhabit that version of yourself completely. But then something shifts. Maybe by afternoon, maybe by the next morning, and suddenly you're back in the weight of what is. The bank account that doesn't reflect your vision, the people around you who don't see what you see, the evidence, or lack of it, that anything is actually working. And you think there's something wrong with this. You think the oscillation means you're unstable, unfocused, not cut out for this. But I want to tell you something that might change everything. This is the place. This exact experience you're having right now, this is the most important phase of your entire journey. And here's what nobody tells you about it. You will never need to be here again. This is a one-time passage, a threshold you cross once and only once, which is why most people don't recognize it while they're in it. They think it's a waiting room. They think it's the space before their life begins. It's not. This is where your life is actually being decided. Let me explain what's really happening when you feel like you're living in two realities at once. There's the reality everyone else can see, the one with the struggle, the building, the waiting, the not yet. This is the reality that shows up in your circumstances, the reality you have to explain to people, the reality that makes you feel like you're behind. And then there's the reality you feel, the one where the future version of you isn't imaginary at all. It's more real than what's in front of you. You can feel that person's confidence, their calm, their certainty. You know how they think. You know how they move through the world. And on your best days, you make decisions from that place. But here's the problem with existing in two timelines simultaneously. When that future self feels close, you feel invincible. You take risks. You speak differently. You carry yourself like someone who has already arrived. But when the present self reasserts its weight, when you look around and see only the gap, something in you collapses. You feel like a fraud, like you've been pretending, like the distance between where you are and where you're going is a distance you specifically cannot cross. This whiplash isn't a malfunction. This is what transformation actually feels like from the inside. You see, we have this idea that growth is linear, that you start at point A, you work hard, and you arrive at point B, and the whole journey is a steady upward climb. But that's not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked for anyone who has genuinely transformed their life. The actual pattern looks more like this: a surge forward, then what feels like a collapse, an expansion, then a contraction. A day where you feel like you've finally broken through, followed by a week where you feel like you've lost everything you gained. And in those low moments, in those contractions, you don't just question the path, you question yourself. You wonder if the vision was ever real or just a story you told yourself to avoid facing your limitations. But here's what I need you to understand. The contraction isn't the loss of progress. The contraction is the integration of progress. It's your system catching up to what you've become. It's the space where the growth actually takes root. Think of it like a muscle after intense exercise. There's a period where it feels weaker, not stronger, where it needs rest and recovery. But that period isn't the undoing of the workout. It's where the workout actually becomes part of you. Your psychology works the same way. And if you keep interpreting the contractions as failure, if you keep using those low moments as evidence that you're not meant for this, you will walk away right before the integration completes. This is why most people quit when they do. Not because they weren't close, but because being close feels worse than being far away. Now let me tell you what it actually means to be ready, because you've probably been misunderstanding this your entire life. You think being ready means feeling ready. You think it means having confidence, having clarity, having some kind of stable internal state that doesn't waver. And so you wait. You wait for the doubt to go away. You wait to feel certain. You wait for the fear to stop. But that's not what readiness is. That's not what it's ever been. Readiness is what you do when you don't feel ready. It's the action you take on the morning when everything in you is screaming to stay in bed. It's the work you do when there's no external evidence that the work is leading anywhere. It's choosing the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing when nobody is watching and nobody will ever know. This is what preparation actually looks like. Not motivation. Not inspiration. Just the decision to keep going when every feeling you have is telling you to stop. And here's what you need to hear. You've been doing this. You've been showing up on those days. You've been taking action without proof. And you're probably not giving yourself any credit for it because you're too focused on how far you still have to go. But the distance you've already traveled, the internal ground you've already covered, that's not nothing. That's everything. Because most people never start. And of those who start, most people quit during the exact phase you're in right now. You're still here. That's not a small thing. You've been so focused on what you haven't done that you've forgotten to acknowledge what you have. The mornings you got up anyway. The work you did when you didn't want to. The times you chose the vision over the comfort. Nobody saw those moments. Nobody applauded, but they happened. And they're the reason you're still in this. The fatigue you feel, the heaviness, that's not a sign you're failing. It's the weight of becoming. You're carrying two versions of yourself right now. The old one that's dissolving and the new one that's forming. And that's exhausting. Of course it is. But it doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something is happening. But there's a voice, isn't there? A voice that speaks loudest in the quiet moments. When you're trying to fall asleep. When you're alone with your thoughts. When the distraction stops and you're left with yourself. And this voice asks a question that feels like a knife. What if it never happens for you? And you think this voice is your enemy. You think it's the thing you need to defeat before you can succeed. You try to silence it with affirmations. You try to drown it out with motivation. You try to argue with it, to present evidence, to build a case for why it's wrong. But what if that voice isn't trying to stop you? What if it's trying to test you? You see, there's something that happens when a person commits to a path that will genuinely transform them. The commitment gets tested. Not once, but repeatedly. And the tests don't come from outside. They come from within. They come in the form of doubt, exhaustion, the seductive logic of giving up. And every time you feel that voice rising, every time you hear the question, what if this isn't for you? You're not being attacked. You're being asked. You're being asked, do you actually want this? Or do you just like the idea of wanting it? And here's how you answer. Not with words, not with affirmations, not with arguments. You answer by what you do next. If this were just a fantasy, you would have found an easier story by now. You would have negotiated yourself into something more comfortable, something with less resistance, something that didn't require you to keep walking into uncertainty every single day. But you're still here, still asking when, not if. And that tells me something about you that you might not see in yourself. You have faith, not the clean kind, not the comfortable kind. A messy faith. A faith that coexists with doubt, that gets shaky and uncertain, that sometimes feels more like stubbornness than belief. A faith that doesn't feel like faith at all because it's wrapped in so much questioning. But it's faith nonetheless, because you're still in the game. You haven't walked away. And that means somewhere inside you, deeper than the doubt, there's a knowing that won't let you quit. That knowing is the only proof you need. I want you to understand something about the people who have made it to the other side. The ones living the life you're building toward. The ones who turned their vision into reality. They all stood exactly where you're standing. Every single one of them. I spoke with a woman once who built a company that now serves thousands of people. I asked her about the early days, expecting to hear about strategy, vision, the blueprint she followed. She laughed. The early days, she said, were just me crying in my car before client calls, convinced everyone would find out I had no idea what I was doing, and then making the call anyway. That's what the in-between looked like for her. Not confidence, not clarity, just action in the absence of both. They had the same vision and the same gap you have. They had days of electricity and days of collapse. They questioned whether they were the exception to the rule, the one for whom it wouldn't work. They looked at their circumstances and couldn't see how it would happen. They felt the weight, the fatigue, the voice asking, what's the point? And they kept going. Not because they had more confidence than you, not because they had more talent or connections or luck. They kept going because they refused to let the doubt make the decision. The doubt was there. It's always there. It never fully goes away, not even after you've made it. But they acted anyway. They treated the doubt as information, not as instruction. They felt the fear and moved their feet regardless. And that's the only difference. The only difference between the ones who made it and the ones who didn't. The ones who made it let action decide. So I want to offer you something. A different way of measuring where you are. A different way of knowing whether you're on track. Stop measuring your progress by how you feel. I know that sounds strange. We're taught to check in with ourselves, to monitor our emotional state, to use our feelings as a compass. And in many areas of life, that's wise. But in this phase, in the between, your feelings will lie to you. Your feelings will fluctuate based on how much sleep you got, what you ate, what someone said to you, what you saw on your phone, how the weather is, whether you're getting sick. Your feelings will tell you you're failing on the same day you're actually breaking through. Your feelings will tell you to quit 10 minutes before the breakthrough arrives. Feelings are data, but they're not accurate data. Not right now. Not in this phase. So stop asking yourself how you feel about your progress. Start asking different questions. Did you show up today? That's progress. Did you take one action, however small, toward the thing you're building? That's progress. Did you choose not to quit when quitting would have been easier? That's progress. Did you resist the urge to burn it all down and start something new just because the current thing got hard? That's progress. Because this phase isn't measured in breakthroughs. This phase is measured in consistency, in the decision to keep walking when you can't see the path, in the choice to stay in the game when every logical part of your brain is telling you to find an easier game. And by that measure, by the only measure that actually matters right now, you're already succeeding. You just can't see it yet. Here's what I want you to see about where you are. Imagine you're in a forest. Dense, unfamiliar, no map, no trail markers, no sense of which direction leads out. And you have only two options, move or stay still. So you pick a direction and start walking. And after a while, you hit a dead end. So you adjust. You try another way. And that's not quite right either. You keep moving, keep adjusting, keep hitting walls and finding new paths. Now, you could interpret this as failure. You could say, I keep choosing wrong, I keep wasting time, I'm not good at navigating. Someone else would have found the way out by now. But that would be a misunderstanding. Because every wrong direction you've taken has taught you something, it's eliminated a possibility, it's sharpened your instincts, it's built your capacity to read the terrain. You're not lost because you're incompetent. You're in a place that can only be crossed by moving through it. There is no map for the in-between. There never was. The people who made it through didn't have better directions. They just kept moving when they couldn't see where they were going. The forest isn't punishing you. The forest is training you, and the training is the point. I want to tell you something that might be difficult to hear, but I think you need to hear it. This phase you're in, this between, this is not preparation for your life. This is your life, and it might be the most alive you'll ever feel. Because right now you have hunger, you have direction, you have something you're building toward, something that matters to you. You have skin in the game. You're not comfortable, and that discomfort is keeping you sharp, keeping you moving, keeping you becoming. And I know you're waiting for the other side, waiting for the moment when you've arrived and you can finally relax into what you've built. But I need to tell you something about that moment. It doesn't end the uncertainty. It just changes the game. The stakes get higher. The problems get different. The doubt doesn't disappear. It just learns new questions to ask. The people who have made it will tell you the same thing. They'll tell you that the hunger you feel now, the aliveness of building something from nothing, that never comes back the same way. Once you've arrived, you can't unarrive. And many of them miss this phase. They miss the rawness of it, the intensity, the feeling that everything was still possible because nothing was yet decided. So if you're waiting to feel successful before you let yourself appreciate this, if you're postponing your experience of the journey until you've reached the destination, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss the part where you were most alive. So here's what I want to leave you with. The fact that you're still here, the fact that you clicked on this video looking for something you couldn't name, the fact that these words are landing somewhere inside you, that's not an accident. Something in you recognized this. Something in you needed to hear that the place you're in isn't a mistake, that the struggle isn't a sign you're on the wrong path, that the doubt doesn't disqualify you. And the only confirmation you need isn't out there somewhere. It's not in a sign or a signal or someone else's approval. It's in here. It's in the fact that you refuse to stop, that you keep getting back up, that no matter how many times the voice asks if it's worth it, you keep answering with your actions. That's not weakness dressed up as strength. That's strength, the only kind that matters. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Not for me, for yourself, say it out loud, or write it where you'll see it, or post it somewhere others can witness it. 3 words: I keep walking. That's it. That's the whole thing. Because in this phase, that's the only declaration